Each of the candidates will give an opening statement, after which we will open up the discussion to questions. Please address your question to one or the other of the candidates, or either one if you don't particularly have a preference, but whichever one gets asked the question is not the end of the game. The other candidate also has an opportunity to answer the same question. And we'll try to make sure that it goes back and forth, but of course I can't control what you ask. So if you sense that all of the questions are going one way or the other, maybe you can break in there and ask a question the other way to keep things flowing a little bit, okay? So I thought maybe we would toss a coin, and then I thought, well, alphabetical order also works. And then I thought, ladies first, that's kind of passe. So I went with alphabetical order. So our first candidate is McDowell.
Okay. Thank you all so much for coming here tonight. My name is McDowell, and I grew up in West Newbury. I went to the Page School, and I'm a proud Kentucky graduate. I've lived in San Francisco and Boston, but ultimately knew I would return to West Newbury to raise my family. I hold a bachelor's degree in science and in nursing, and most recently have worked at Anna Jake's Hospital for over 16 years. I love the town of West Newbury, and I feel very passionate about the opportunity to work as a team member with the selectmen. I look forward to supporting the town and ultimately protecting the quality of life that we have all known to love here. I am a very open-minded person who comes with no personal agenda, but I believe the needs of the town will ultimately drive my tenure. I am confident that I will be able to work effectively with all of the departments and committees of town to be successful. I think as we look to the future of the town, it is important to look at demographic trends. Things to consider is that our aging population is growing and the number of children entering the school is declining. We are all very focused on passing the new school project because our town depends on it. Our town does not do much industry. Our town does people, community, and education. A school is often the heart of a community. With the increased taxes that will follow the hopeful build of a new school comes concerns to some. As a town, we need to help lessen this burden to residents. We need to help foster a community that our elders can afford to stay in their homes and young families can afford to move in. We need our generations to be able to live side by side. I know this is only the tip of the iceberg, and we have a lot to cover, but I'm looking forward to forming a partnership with the other selectmen, and if given the honor to become your selectman, I promise that I will work very hard to represent every one of you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight, and in particular, I'd like to thank the Historical Society for organizing the opportunity to address the town's voters, and our town moderator, Casey Swallow, for offering to run the meeting. My family and I moved to West Newbury in 1996, recognizing it as a gem that offered a vibrant community, bucolic environment, and was part of a great school district to educate our two daughters. Since moving to town, I felt it was important to engage with and contribute to town governance, and at the first opportunity, volunteered to be appointed to a planning board seat that opened up midterm in early '98. I subsequently ran for the balance of that term at the next election, and then for one additional term served as a chairperson for a couple of years during my tenure. I also served on the Comprehensive Plan Committee and the Ad Hoc Affordable Housing Committee. In 2006, I was instrumental in formation of the Energy Advisory Committee and have remained there since, serving as committee chairperson until 2016. I'm running for selectman now because I see the town in the process of several positive changes, including the transition to a professional town manager, hopefully the construction of a new Pentucket High and Middle School, and significant upgrade to the municipal water system, and want to help them get done right. I make my living as a technical sales representative. I have a degree in mechanical engineering. My wife has worked as a school psychologist and counselor within the Pentucket School District since 1984, and both of my daughters, now in their late 20s, attended Pentucket from grade school through high school, getting a great education in the process. Thanks.
I can't do this sitting down. It's just not me. So we'll open it up now for questions. Mr. Matt.
So I would address this question to both candidates.
Take it easy.
Oh, I gotta go up? Okay, I'm sorry.
This is for the TV audience to hear, so you don't need to speak into that unless Casey wants to repeat the question. So.
Sure, thank you. So I would address this question to both candidates. The town of West Newbury is a complex organism. It has, I believe, over 20 appointed committees, over 6 elected committees, a large number of employees. It is increasingly affected by more regulation, and it's a very dynamic environment. So I'd like to ask both of you, what makes you qualified to step into the chief executive role, or one of the chief executive roles? What about your background and career qualifies you to take on such a responsible position in tech? Thank you.
And since Mrs. McDowell went first for the opening statement, we'll start with Mr. Clark.
Thank you. I've run a small business, actually 2 small businesses, for the last 30 years. My current business is about 15 years old, and I'm a one-man operation right now. Prior to that, I was part of a larger company, 3 principals, and limited number of employees, but we did have some employee management requirements. As being in technical sales, I'm working with people in the design process on an ongoing basis, where the real function of my job, besides understanding how things work, is making people or enabling people to talk with each other and communicate with each other and understand, have sort of a mutual understanding of what's going on, so that in the end we can get to yes. So we can get to a product at a point that's acceptable to everybody. And I see that as it's sort of a broadly applicable process where you need to be able to communicate, you need to understand what other people are saying, and you need to recognize when other people aren't hearing each other, and somehow bring them together. And I think in large part that will help me in functioning as part of the executive office of this town, making sure that people are able to communicate with one another, whether they're within the town or outside entities who are trying to work with the town, or for that matter, on the board that I would sit on.
Yeah.
I think there are some very core reasons why I'm qualified for this job and the best person for this job. And it starts with my strong leadership skills, my effective communication, and I'm a very approachable and accessible person. At work, I do support the nurses with the Massachusetts Nursing Association, and I'm an advocate and a resource for staff members throughout the hospital on a daily basis. I support patients and advocate for them on a daily basis, and I'm very comfortable reaching across every aspect of the hospital to make sure that I can get anything done that needs to be done.
Judge.
How many hours a week do you envision devoting to this job? And I'd like Paul to go first.
Sure. I'm comfortable devoting as many hours as it takes to get the job done. I'm very fortunate right now in my life to only have to work part-time. I'm contracted for 16 hours a week at work. My kids are more independent than they've ever been, one being away at college, and one of them who recently got his driver license, and that opened up my world, and I'm available.
I'm assuming this is gonna take somewhere in the range of 15 to 20 hours a week. Could be more than that. I doubt it'll be less. You know, fortunately for me, I pretty much define my own schedule. You know, I work for myself. I rep one company, and I can do things when I see they're most appropriate. So, you know, I'm gonna step up to whatever time it requires. I'm sure they're gonna be good weeks, light weeks, and they're gonna be weeks that are brutal. I don't have a problem with that.
So one of the articles on the warrant is reference to the CPA tax being reduced from 3% to 0.5%. Just want to know your stand on that article.
Can
you say it louder? Sorry. My question is in regards to the CPA tax being proposed at town meeting being reduced from 3% to 0.5%. I'm wondering what your stand is, what your opinion is on that.
I'm supportive of staying at 3%, and the reason for that is that I see the CPA, funding the CPA fully as being a long-term investment. You know, we have been getting a state match. Over the life of the fund, we've seen just under $2 million of state money, matching money. As I'm sure everybody's aware, you know, that number has, in the last few years, been reduced somewhat, but the state is working on additional funding. Both the governor and the legislature are working on adding additional funding to CPA funds. So I won't try to predict what it's going to be long-term, but I expect us to continue to get a fairly significant match if we maintain the 3% maximum. You know, it's sort of like a 401k where you choose or choose not to meet your employer to make your maximum deduction to get the maximum out of your employer's match. You know, if it were me, I would always try to get the maximum match.
Sure. So, I support reducing the CPA tax. I think that we have a few $1 million in that account right now, and I don't think there's enough applications that come forward every year that are gonna use up that amount of money. I think that we have to make some concessions in town because we are asking people to increase their taxes to pay for the school. I would think most of us agree that we need the school to pass, and we need to find ways to because it's gonna increase the taxes, I think we need to find ways to give some money back to the taxpayer. It's gonna be up to the town whether that passes or not, but whether it passes or not, ultimately, I think it's very important that we do come up with a plan of what we're gonna do with that money.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My question involves, use the mic, please. Sorry.
Actually, you know,
Should I turn around?
No,
this is awkward because they.
no, just speak loud.
Just speak loud.
Just speak as loud as you
I
can.
can't hear you, so you just need to speak
I'll
up.
be loud. So Massachusetts, the governor and the legislature have done a lot to address environmental issues. And even now, you know, the legislature's looking at climate change, and thanks to Representative Mira, they're looking at the sewage overflow in Merrimack. And neighboring Newburyport is doing all sorts of environmental action, including trying to reduce climate emissions. So my question is two-part. Do you believe that environmental problems affect us here in West Newbury, and do you think we ought to do more about them here in West Newbury? Thanks.
Okay, so, first part, do I think environmental changes affect us? I do think they affect us. I think we see it on a daily basis. I think with the storms that come through the town and the extreme weather changes, I think we've all seen things bloom in our gardens at different times than we have in years past. So yes, I do think it affects us, and I do think we need to try to work in our town to do as much as we can to counter the problems that the weather changes are causing.
Well, I guess, the first word is yes. Definitely, and we're going to see an increasing rate of effects. The town is in the process right now of applying for the Mass Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program so that we can assess our vulnerability and come up with mitigating strategies. We don't really know yet what we're going to come up with. I mean, we have a number of ideas of issues that we expect to see. They could be related to flooding, they could be related to power loss, and electrical power loss. Not necessarily short term. If we look back 10 or 12 years ago, there was an ice storm in late fall that caused several communities in central Massachusetts to lose power for as much as 2 months. I'm not saying that's going to happen here, but we need to try to understand whether or not we're vulnerable to such things. And we need to figure out strategies as how to deal with it. Currently, if something like that were to happen here, we have no place for people to go who are vulnerable. There are elderly in town. There's housing right behind us that depends upon electric power. In some cases, people who are very fragile, who if they were to lose power, would be in dire straits, life-threatening dire straits. We're going to be affected by climate change. We need to take it seriously and try to understand how to mitigate its effects and how to reduce our contribution to the causes of climate change.
Mr. McGrath.
Microphone work?
Oh, you blew out my ear.
You have to really talk loud for
Okay.
people to hear.
The first question described adequately the complexity of the town organism. Amongst the comments were the number of committees, standing committees. I would like to hear from each candidate if they think in some cases we have too many committees, ad hoc committees in particular. I'm not targeting established standing committees. The ad hoc committees, and if there hasn't been perhaps an inkling to every problem that comes up to form a new committee to solve the problem.
They're right here. Start here first.
I don't think we have too many committees. My personal opinion is that if we believe we have an issue, then we should look into it. And if people are willing to volunteer their time to do that, then they should be allowed to do that under the auspices of town government and with whatever support the town government's capable of providing. Now, I understand the limitations and resources in our town government and that they're being pushed right now. But I don't think that we should push aside or push away and offer for people to study an issue that has impact on the town because we think we have too many committees.
So, committees and subspecialties seem to be the way of the world right now. It's the same in medicine. Nobody's a general doctor anymore. Everybody has their own specialty. But the key to that is making sure that everybody comes together at some point to find a cohesive answer to the problems that they're all addressing, because it doesn't do any good to have all these committees on their singular paths without really connecting at some point.
Hi, my question is for Rick. Rick, you seem to champion green causes, for which I commend you. I think we all feel strongly that it's our job to save it, one person at a time. My question to you is this: having just completely gutted and renovated my home, there are many green alternatives that were much more costly than current alternatives. And when I looked at the break even, it was many years down the road. I might not even see the advantages during my home ownership. So my question to you is, as a selectman, will you have the objectivity to say, even though I prefer the green choice, and it's something that I personally advocate, because clearly you're on that committee, will you have the ability to stand back and say it may not be the best thing for the town? Thank you.
So the question is directed to you, so you can go
Correct.
first.
Correct. Yeah, I think I'd be capable of making a rational decision based on economics. We have done, as the Energy Advisory Committee, working with the town, we've done a lot of things that have not cost the town money and have actually saved the town money. And in general, that's what we focused on. That's what we look for, is opportunities where we have a dual effect. One would be to reduce our energy consumption, our greenhouse footprint, our greenhouse gas footprint, while concurrently either saving the town money or making the town money. And that can be represented by the solar PV field over on Main Street next to Page School. We're making the town over $50,000 a year. The net gain to the town is over $50,000 a year. And we've reduced the town's electrical, municipal government's energy use by 85 to 90%, which means that we've reduced our greenhouse gas footprint concurrently, a concurrent amount. Another example, a place where we spent some money and saved the town money was the small PV system over by the DPW garage. The town put in about $2,000. We make $2,000 a year, plus or minus, on that every single year. So that had a 1-year payback, and it's paying itself back, has been paying itself back every year since. We were able to get over $350,000 of state grants through the Green Communities Program, which has been put into lighting, this LED lighting here, various HVAC or thermal system improvements throughout town buildings that are saving the town money on operational costs and on maintenance costs. So there are a host of other things that can be done, that will be done in the future.
I think that's great. Yes.
Yes,
I have a question for you both about the town's governance structure. Not too long ago, the town voted to change our governance model. And we went with a model which added a professional town manager to help our town manage the day-to-day operations of the town, which would then relieve the Board of Selectmen folks from being so involved in day-to-day management and allow them to attend to more high-level strategic and policy concerns. I think everybody in the room probably has a different assessment as to how well that transition is going. I certainly have mine. I'd be curious about knowing what your assessment is of how the transition to the new town manager form of government is going, and what you specifically would recommend to help that be optimally integrated into our town governance for the benefit of everyone.
So there are definitely going to be some growing pains with any changes that occur in a town. I think that we all have to be open-minded and patient, and we need to take our time and figure out how it's going to work for the best of this town to make sure that Angus is getting what he wants out of the job and what we are getting, what we need out of him to make it the best opportunity that we can.
So in the recent auditor's report that was presented to the Board of Selectmen at their meeting this week, there was discussion in that report, in the, I think it was the cover letter for the report, that suggested that one of the first things the selectmen should do is search for an outside entity, sort of a management expert, management consultant, that could help the town to reassign the way, or redefine the way that it works, and come up with a new set of policies and procedures that reflect the fact that we now have a town manager who's a professional manager, and we need to best use his skills. Currently, there's a tendency for micromanagement of town government by selectmen because, I guess, there's history of it. But it doesn't work anymore, and it isn't the most efficient way for the town government to run or to use our town manager's skill set.
One of the important topics that was mentioned in both statements was the school project. We'll be talking about that next month tonight. If the school project does not pass in that event, this is a question to both of you. What do you think the Board of Selectmen's role will be in terms of next steps regarding the secondary campus sector?
Well, as presented by the school superintendent, if the vote fails, his next step is going to be to come to the towns, all three Pentucket towns, and request funding to basically do a study, a real study on the cost to bring the high school up to code. Currently, there are multiple systems there: the HVAC system, the electrical system, the water distribution system, and some parts of the building envelope that are in state of failure or pending failure, catastrophic failure, meaning that it won't be repairable. It's going to be a big cost, and so the selectmen's responsibility then would be to take that to the town and see if the town will vote to support that. And if we don't vote to support that study, the assessment of cost and design, then we're kind of throwing in the towel on having a school system.
You know what, I think it's gonna be a really sad day for the town and a disappointment if it doesn't pass. And I think people are gonna have to really take pause and think about what the next step is gonna be. There's definitely gonna be a mourning process, I think, for everybody that's worked so hard on it. But we are going to have to meet with the school committee and try to decide what's gonna be the best option for the town moving forward.
Hi, my question's for Mr. Parker. Hi, Rick. We have a diversity issue at the top of the leadership in this town. I myself have experienced gender and age discrimination with the current selectman, both as a volunteer for the Council on Aging and as chairman of the Community Center Committee. And I know others have as well. Given that you are a similar demographic to the sitting selectman in your years of experience, many folks that I've talked to see you as being part of that cohort of folks that keep some people out. I don't mean you specifically, but as a group. So my question for you is, if you were elected, what specific course of action you would take to address these issues of diversity at the top of the leadership of this town?
Okay. I guess, first off, defending myself, I don't see myself as part of the status quo. Certainly I share gender, and I share generationally with current board members, but that shouldn't be exclusionary either. I think I'm innovative. As far as addressing your question about gender issues and better gender distribution for positions within town government, yeah, clearly there's very little representation of women in upper management positions in town government. And I would be an advocate for, I think a diverse workforce, a diverse management force is very important. If you look at industry, if you look at businesses that are most successful, the better their sharing between, the better their diversity, not just in gender, but in race, in all aspects that make up humanity. The better their diversity, the stronger they are. So I think, we should, in West Newbury's town government, as opportunity allows, try to have more women managers.
Part of that for me?
Well,
Diversity.
the format is that you do have the opportunity, both of you have the opportunity to address.
Sorry,
any
okay,
questions.
I can reflect on that. So, I've actually met a lot of strong women in town as I met with committees and organizations and volunteer groups. So I'm not sure I agree that there are not a lot of women working really hard in this town. And in terms of, can a woman do a job better or can a man do a job better? I'm not sure. I don't necessarily, I think it's up to the person to do better.
This is for Polly, and I was very much commend you on wanting to decrease taxes. And one of the ways you talked about decreasing taxes was through regionalization and municipal job sharing.
Yes.
And I want to talk a few minutes about regionalization because about 8 years ago, when the world was coming to an end, West Newbury was very much into focusing on regionalization. I was on a team where we took a look at the dispatch center and trying to regionalize the dispatch center, which is now the 911 communication center. I'm sure you may not be familiar with it. We had a team, we looked at it. From about 100,000 feet, it was a great idea. But the more we met, the more we realized that there was a lot of gaps to that project plan and a lot of gaps to the cost savings. So at the time, West Newbury made the decision not to move forward, which was the right decision, because today that 911 communication center is in trouble. The second thing is, I was on the finance committee and Tracy Blaze was very much into regionalization. And so we took a trip over to Merrimack Senior Community Center. Have you been there? Have you guys been there? It's beautiful, right? And one of the ideas was to partner with Merrimack and in West Newbury in terms of senior citizens and getting together. What was interesting is we came back, I wasn't at the meeting, and I went to Tracy. I said, Tracy, how did it go? He said it didn't go very well. West Newbury didn't want to do it. So my question to you is, I love your idea about regionalization.
Yeah.
I love your idea about municipal job sharing.
Sure.
What kind of thoughts have you given beyond just a couple examples I just gave? Thank you, by the way.
Sure. So, I'm open to almost anything. We have incredible talent of people in this town, and I think we can absolutely reach out. We do it already. Say something as simple as the dog officer. I think we have like a 70-30 split, and it's worked well. There hasn't been a problem with that. We share a car, we share expenses, and it's worked out quite well. We're a tiny town. We don't need necessarily a full-time employee for every single role or opportunity to work that there is in this town. I don't think people need to get fired. I don't think we need to start, cutting jobs, but as opportunities come about, I think we need to feel open-minded towards them.
Oh, Yeah, thank you, Jen. I'm sorry, I will recognize you in just a minute, but Mr. Parker hasn't had his Mr. Parker.
I guess in large part, I would agree with what Polly said, but, you know, I think there are gonna be a limited number of opportunities where we can, share with other communities. More likely, my guess is that we would find opportunities to share within our own government for people, in positions to share within our own town. And I'm not in a position to speculate where that might be yet. Hope to have that opportunity. But I'm sure that's something that our town manager has his eyes open for as well. That's all I'd say.
I'm sorry, Mr.
In Rick's opening, he mentioned, you know, some of the positions that he took with the town, he was involved with. And I saw in today's Daily News article, where you were going profile, that you were on the Mill Pond Committee. Could you tell me what exactly were your responsibilities on that and how that would help you as a select person in town? Sure. Thank you.
So, as a committee member, originally a voting member, what I have to do with is coming together as protectors of the property, coming together with a common goal, and just trying to see eye to eye and come up with decisions that are the best for the property. And I think just having an open mind towards that, towards the town in general, is what's gonna help me. Just realizing that we're all here for a common goal, and that's to help West Newbury be the best town that it can be, to come together as a community and just make it the place that we all love and support that.
I'm not sure how I'm supposed to answer a question about a time on the Bill Con committee, because I've never been on the Bill Con committee.
So answer the question about committee now.
Okay.
I was talking about background for the job.
Okay, yeah, so I was on the planning board for about 6.5 years. Took over somebody's term who had reason to resign, and then ran for a term following that. Serving 2 years as chair. That was very interesting. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot from it. Learned quite a bit about the functioning of town government and how to work interdepartmentally here. Understanding how interdependent departments are upon each other's information to make sound decisions. As for the last 12 years, as a member of the Energy Advisory Committee, I've spent a lot of time with people in other departments. Part of that was in the process of pulling us through the Green Communities process, being designated as a green community, working with virtually every department in our town government, having to understand what their resources were, or at least what their resources were that had any impact on their energy usage. Quite honestly, I think that's given me a lot of insight into that interdepartmental relationships in West Newbury.
A question for Polly. This is a Mill Pond question again. The Mill Pond management plan states that the committee shall meet every 2 years and review and amend the plan. The last update to the plan was in 2007. So as a member of the Mill Pond committee, can you explain why the management plan hasn't been updated in so long, and please explain the significance of the changes that are now being made to the plan. I believe we vote on one of them at the town meeting, and then the other 3 or 4 substantial changes sort of fall into place after that.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, I think it was more of a housekeeping issue where there were changes made, but never put on paper, so now we're officially voting to make sure that it's official.
What are the changes?
To make sure that, they're recognizing that the, selectmen are supporting what the plan is.
Now I can see that this would be a hard one.
I don't have a good answer to that question.
Well, I feel your pain, so we'll move on. Try to make sure I'm not missing it.
I might try to combine 2 questions. Is that a little sneaky of me? Do you support the Park and Recreation Committee's plan to expand usage on Dunfield that they brought forward last fall? And what steps would you propose as selected to fairly balance the needs of all the stakeholders on Pipestave Hill? That's one cherished spot in town. And the second question kind of goes into that in a different way. Another cherished spot is that American Legion Hall. And what's your vision for the American Legion Hall and some short and long-term goals for that? Thank you.
Let's see. Why don't we take this in 2 parts since they're not related? So you can start with the first part, which is Pipestave Hill, and then we'll.
I didn't catch the second part of the question.
American Legion Hall.
No, I mean the second part of the first part. So you said you said Dunfield, and what else? The
What steps
Pipestave?
do you propose? It was a very controversial, issue.
Okay.
And how can you fairly balance the needs of all the stakeholders up there? Because a lot of people have different ideas for how to use that area.
Okay.
Well, I guess I'm a little confused about one thing, because you referred to Dunfield and then you referred to Pipestave Hill, and I look at them as, although they're contiguous, they're separate parcels. Dunfield, at least the way I see it, as a separate parcel. I don't think we've ever really done a study of how that land might be applied. I understand that last year we voted on potential engineering study. I think it was going to be funded by CPA funds for potentially developing a portion of it as sports fields. But I don't think we've ever taken sort of a global view of the Dunn property and tried to understand how it might best be applied. And I personally think that that would be the way to start, as opposed to starting to pick at it piece by piece and designate this piece for something and that piece for something before we have an overview of what we hope to do with it. When it was originally purchased, there were various ideas thrown out on the table. Among those were potential to using it for a school site in the future. Maybe we don't need to think about that anymore. Maybe we do. There are probably other ideas that we ought to consider. And I think before we do anything with it that involves construction of anything on it, that we should do a full consideration of the parcel in its entirety for best use, best application for the town. Including its use potentially as agricultural land, which, what do you know, that's what it used to be. As far as the balance of Pipestave Hill, yeah, I know there's conflict sometimes between different user groups and parking. I don't know enough about it to have a solution to that, how to make everybody work well together.
Can I just follow? Can you just talk about your leadership approach in terms of dealing with different stakeholders who have very different ideas for something? How would you approach that if you were on board?
Okay, so I'm gonna have to repeat the question because
you know what I mean.
For the TV set. Yeah. So the question is, since there are conflicts among various organizations that use that property, how would you manage those conflicts to try to get people to work together better so that they can resolve those issues?
Well, the conflicts that I'm aware of, probably are others, there are always other conflicts I know about, conflicts that I'm aware of, surround use of lots, parking lot space. You know, who's able to put a car where and who gets antsy if somebody else puts a car in the wrong spot. I think there that we need to understand the relationship between space needed for different uses and the sort of the temporal aspect, you know, the time aspect of that, of their requirements. And I don't know enough to, you know, to give you an answer to that, but you need to get information first before you can make an intelligent decision.
Okay, let me start with Dunfield. I think Dunfield is one of the gems of the town. I think it is a beautiful addition to the mill pond, the pipe stave, and the fields. I think it's a beautiful opportunity for passive recreation. I think that the town voted down Dunfield. I think that's already happened. I think if people want to try to come up with another plan for it and make proposals to the town, then we'll take that on and see if we can find out what would be the best use for that land. I think pipe stave sometimes is complicated. There's a lot of kids that need field space in town, and everyone's vying for their sport, their space, their time. I think the Park and Rec and the school does a nice job working together to try to make sure people get their field space. There's even private club sports that use that space, and that's very generous. I think there's going to be new opportunities with the high school passing. I know we bought a house in front of the high school, and that is going to provide an opportunity for perhaps another field, which is great. We need our kids outdoors, playing, doing what kids do. It's important. The second part, did you say the car? The car building, it's a beautiful building. I think that it would be amazing to find out what we could do with that space with CPA that's going to benefit the town, for a lot of people to get benefit out of it. I've heard a lot of ideas such as a museum. It would be wonderful. Senior space, you know, I'm not sure that's the right space for that, but I've heard it. I think a lot of door-to-door over the last couple of months, people want a coffee shop. You know, that's probably not the right place either. But it's certainly a building that we have to cherish and protect.
Mr. Parker, you can address the car.
Okay. I'm not sure what the building is capable of supporting. You know, similarly, I've heard people suggest, wouldn't it be cool if we had a little sandwich shop or a coffee shop in town? I've heard people suggest, wouldn't it be nice if it was a museum? There are probably other ideas, you know, can be disconcerting to the person who thought that there were too many committees already. But I'm sure that there are people who have already gotten together and considered options. I wasn't part of that process. I don't know what they came up with, and I don't know what they discussed. But I think we need to, with an open mind, consider all possible options for it, and hopefully settle on one of them and move forward. Because, you know, right now, the building's just going to continue to go back downhill. It's protected right now from the elements, but that protection isn't going to last a whole lot longer, and then it's going to start sliding back downhill.
Wait a minute, because you've already asked a question, and we've got a couple of other people.
There's plenty of duplicates.
Not duplicate people, John. We've got some more people, and I'll call on you after. I will.
Mine's relevant to the very last question.
The lady who has been waiting patiently to be recognized yields the floor to you.
You're good, folks.
She did? Once the car building, Soldiers and Sailors Memorial for the Civil War soldiers in town was funded and the site had not been selected, but it was funded. It took some 40 years for the town fathers to decide where to put it. And that's why it says 1900 over the doorway, not that. I think that it was wise for the town to take it, to preserve it for historical reasons. Thanks to the CPA, which, I didn't like that too much. Thanks to the CPA funds, which I think perhaps, but it needs to be stabilized. I look at it like this: you don't need to know what you're going to do with it, and this is a question to see if they would adopt my point. It's rather to preserve it. I think 50 years from now, the restored historic building, and people will look back and say, wow, they were really smart. They saved it. They put it in mothballs, and now we can do something 50 years from now. We need to respond to that notion.
That's the question.
I can respond.
The question is, do you
I asked them to
agree with
respond
him?
to that notion.
Yes.
That's the question.
I agree. I think, it's important to have physical history as part of the history of the town as much as there is the stories, the demographics, the families, I'm a daughter of an architect who did a lot of his work on restoration. I hold that near and dear, and I feel like I completely agree that we need to do everything we can to preserve the building.
I think there's an old saying, doesn't like understanding our history informs our future. And certainly the building is worth preserving, but thinking that we should mothball for 50 years and expecting that, it's not going to become, home to, 1,000 raccoons is kind of silly. I think we need to do something. We need to make a decision about it much more quickly than that. But I think we should do something with it.
My question is for both of you. Did somebody approach either of you to run for selectman, or how did you come about deciding to run for town office?
So, you get to go first this time?
I've contemplated in the past, what would it be like to run for selectman? Would it make sense? And never seemed to make sense to me at the time, in part because of circumstances, what I had going on in my life. And also, I guess I didn't really relish the thought of competing against an incumbent. And who would the incumbent that I chose to compete against be, and would it be somebody that I already approved of or not? So in this particular case, there was an opening, and so I was thinking a little bit harder. And then a couple of people asked me if I'd consider running, and that coupled with my own, consideration, independent consideration of it, made me decide to want to run for the position. So, it's a combination.
So, the immediate answer is no. The background story is, like I mentioned earlier, my youngest son got his driving license last May. I immediately found myself with 100 extra hours a week, as you all know. And between working and raising my family, it's the first time I've had a minute to myself. And I said to myself, what's next? What do I want to do now? I find myself like almost stagnant. What's my role now going to be in this world? And two things. The first is, I want to play golf again because it's a passion, and that's something you don't have time to do when you're raising a family. And the second thing is, it's time to give back, and I want to volunteer, and I want to be part of the community that I love.
So, ladies and gentlemen, it's 8:30. I'm willing to continue on if you'd like to, but the evening's getting late. So I suggest maybe you entertaining one or two more questions, or unless I hear an uproar of now we've had enough.
I have a question for Polly. I think part of your platform was just you spoke about the middle school.
Can you speak louder,
Oh,
please?
you can't hear me back there. Okay. Part of your platform was talking about the Middle Street Bridge and the repair of the Middle Street Bridge. What's not clear to me is who's responsible for the bridge, the status of that, who's gonna pay for it, where the money comes from.
Yes.
And at what point in the process will this thing be fixed? And probably comments from Rick at the end, but.
Okay, so I do think it is important to the town to fix the Middle Street Bridge, as it has an impact on the entire town. It is my understanding that the cost of the bridge is to be divided by two towns. It's under the engineering phase of that process. They're trying to figure out what the cost is gonna be, what style bridge they're gonna build, what's gonna make sense because it's wetlands. And I also understand that there's a possibility of a grant from the state of Massachusetts, a small bridge grant. There was a similar one that was used to build a bridge in Newbury on I think it's 1 or 1A.
Comment on that, Rick, or?
Can you sort of refresh your question? Because you were looking for info on the Middle Street Bridge, but in specifics, what?
In the funding, it's obviously gonna be expensive to fix that bridge, and who's responsible to pay?
Okay.
Is it a 50-50 thing, or is it something different?
So, my understanding of the Middle Street Bridge is that, the bridge itself is Newburyport's ownership. However, Newburyport, again, this is my understanding, I'm pretty sure that it's correct, but I'm not 100%. It's Newburyport's bridge, but Newburyport really doesn't have much incentive to do something with it in the near term. The road can't be closed, officially closed between the two communities without an act of the legislature, because it's a road that connects two communities. So West Newbury does have incentive to see something done with it. So we need to negotiate with Newburyport to come up with a mutually acceptable agreement on what the bridge will be, functionally what it'll be, and also who's going to pay for it. And I think you can expect that West Newbury is going to pick up a significant portion of the cost. I don't want to speculate on what that will be. It'll be less than 100, more than 0%, and that's pretty broad range. Maybe it's a 50-50 sharing. I don't know. And when we do that, my understanding at this point is that it doesn't necessarily have to comply with Mass DOT standards because it's a municipal or a town or city related bridge as opposed to a state bridge. Even though it will probably receive some state funding.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Polly, this is directed entirely at you. I'd like to commend you for volunteering and campaigning. I think it's terrific. And I would like nothing more than to have a woman on the selectmen's group. However, listening to the both of you tonight, I've heard Rick be very specific about what he has done in the past, the benefits he has already provided to the town, and very specific about things he would like to see. done in the future. You, on the other hand, said early on that you were the best person for the job. But I've heard you say almost no specifics of what you would do. You want to reduce the CPA, you want to reduce taxes, but you also mentioned you want to keep the car building, which would either rely on CPA funds or increase taxes. I would like to give you the opportunity to be very specific about, besides just loving the town, why you are the best person.
Okay.
Where's the question?
What's the question?
What's the question?
Why are you the
It's
best
very
person?
unfair of you to do this.
Yeah, that's
I'm giving her the opportunity.
Excuse me,
What's the
sir,
question?
sir, the question was
I heard
specifically,
no
why
question.
are you the best person for this job?
That
Is
was
a
a
question.
question.
That is a question.
after an attack.
She's up, giving her a
I'm giving her the opportunity to inform all of us about what she will provide.
Sure. And best is subjective, of course, but I feel that my strong leadership skills, my effective communication, my ability to reach across the departments are all gonna help me guide the town and lead the town.
Thank you.
And I think this is probably the last question.
Backing up to preservation of antique structures. A few years ago, there was a CPA request from a church in town to do repairs on a church. I'd like each of you to address whether you feel that the portion of CPA which is to be dedicated to the preservation of historic structures ought to apply to privately owned and ecclesiastical structures, as well as a building like the fireplace.
That's a real good question. That's not an easy one. Yeah, because I recall that, with the Episcopal Church, and that was a difficult call. I guess on general principle. Okay, great, thanks, thank you. Okay, thanks for picking up on that and having spared just ready to fly.
I guess it was asleep.
Yeah, so in general principle, I personally wouldn't advocate for using public money for what you referred to as ecclesiastical historic structures. I think that was the way you referred to them. On the other hand, sometimes those places have, they have a strong portion of sort of social continuity. And I never heard when that discussion was going on, I never really heard the discussion of the social continuity aspect of it. I really don't recall how I voted because I was torn, because I recognize it as a historic structure, and it's a beautiful building, but it's also somebody's, but not everybody's, religious structure, but it also has a social function. I don't have a clear answer. I'm still on the fence, and if that came up again, I'd be on the fence.
Yeah, I would support that. I certainly would. I think where you said privately owned, I think people's homes are privately owned. Forgive me if I'm wrong, but people can apply for CPA funds if they have a historical home in town. So I would agree with that, but ultimately it's up to the town to vote.
Are we agreed?
Yes.
So, since we started at the opening statement, Mrs. McDowell will start with closing statements from Mr. Collins.
So this is going to be really brief. Thanks for attending tonight's meeting.
I'd like to speak into the microphone.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, this one.
Thanks for attending tonight's meeting. During my time in the planning board, various committees, and especially the Energy Advisory Committee, have demonstrated that I take a long-term perspective on process, actions, and the town's best interests. Our town's balance sheet is comprised of both pluses and minuses. Unfortunately, we really didn't get to what I thought we might get to regarding town finance. So this is maybe a little out of context, but I'll read it anyway. We didn't really get into dollar and cents issues. Our town's balance sheet is comprised of both pluses and minuses, and fiscally conservative and responsible governance includes looking for means to both reduce costs, which we did talk about a little bit in terms of potential sharing, and to increase revenues while continuing to provide equal or greater services. Since this is already a lean ship, I believe our best opportunity to offset our infrastructure and other costs will be to look for new means beyond residential real estate tax to generate revenue. There were ideas that I had hoped would come up where we could talk about possible future revenues, other sources of revenue, and we get to them. All that, I ask you to honor me with your vote. Thank you.
Thank you all. I appreciate your time, and everybody come out and vote.